I want to comment a little bit on this immigration conversation. I'm curious to hear what Nick Fuentes thought. And I'd like to talk a little bit about him as well. The way I see immigration in this country, I think it's interesting because they need the immigration for cheap labor. If you like live in this country and you go into a lot of these different stores, you'll find that a lot of these jobs that people don't want to work are being worked by immigrants right now. And corporations love that because they can, hire these hardworking people for very little. So they need the cheap labor, right, to keep the economy going and to keep their profits as high as they have them. But then at the same time, they don't take into consideration how allowing that many people into the country can drastically change the demographics. And as I understand it, the Democrats have been deliberately doing this, especially in states like Texas, because that's how they're going to flip the state and make it blue. If Texas goes blue, the Republicans will never win the presidency ever again. And so I don't know, that's just how I understand it. I could be wrong on that, but I'm curious to hear like what you guys think.
I've got a different perspective. I'll probably lose a lot of followers by saying this, but and because I've never really talked about the immigration issues, I'd say I'm quite distinct in the sense of I'm pro-immigration, right? And in the sense of, because I think that any society that is multicultural is a more successful society. So in my view, ethno-states have never been successful. So when in history has an ethno-state been successful? Or when right now is an ethno-national state successful? So let's look at our ethno-national states now. I talked about yesterday, like Japan, Korea, failed states. One could say that they failed because of lack of godliness, right? Or it's because it's an ethno-national state, right? So what's the reason why Britain and America are elite, in my view? The reason is because we have a majority white populace with a multicultural a country with people from multicultural perspectives.
But elite in what way? What do you mean? Successful in what way?
Well, if you look at it, they've been dominant. When you look at it from a financial perspective, they've been dominating. When you look at it from a military perspective, they've been dominating. When you look at it
I
from
was just going to say, I feel like to push back a little bit, I think the reason why they're successful is not necessarily because it's multicultural or ethno-nationalist state. I think they're successful because they've had the biggest, baddest militaries for the last few hundred years.
Well, even if you look at it from a innovation perspective, again, America is like elite in that regard, right?
Definitely.
And the reason for that is because of this kind of, because when you have a society where you're just going to specify to one race, you're not going to have that society be as elite or successful or progressive. So as an example, if you look at the empires of the past, the Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire, it was always multiracial, multi-ethnic, and that's how they were successful. Ethno-states, I mean, you could say Germany, some would argue, was doing okay, but then they flopped. They got like.
Let me ask you this: do you feel they were successful because they were multicultural, or did they become multicultural because they were successful? Because what attracted my father, right, to the United States, and my father was one of the best and brightest of his class, like in Iraq. He was like top of his class. He got visa to go study at Oxford University in the UK, and then eventually he was able to come to the US and get his PhD. So he's one of the top, right? And many other people like him from his generation came here for the money, right? For what America has to offer. So do you think it's successful because of the multiculturalism, or the multiculturalism happens because the success attracts people from all around the world?
No, it's both. So basically, people want to come to these countries because of the success of those countries, but those countries are successful because of multiculturalism. So and America's always been a multicultural country, right? So America's like a good example. But like, for example, even UK has been doing extremely well because of its multiculturalism, right? After the World War, like the UK was completely destroyed. It'd been bombed significantly. And it was actually, for example, my grandparents are from Pakistan, right? And so those people who had been colonized had come from those colonies to help rebuild the country. So multiculturalism, in my view, is something that has been tried, has been tested, and has been successful. If you look at, for example, ethnostates, I always give Japan, Korea as an example, because first of all, you look at it, it's a failed, look at the birth rate, right? So the birth rate throughout the world is significantly bad. But Korea is like, even then, 3 times, 4 times worse than even Britain. So it means like it can't be because of modernity, because if it's because of modernity, you'd basically so modernity is causing Korean, Japanese women to like literally be even more averse to having sex or getting with guys. It's clearly not specifically because of modernity, right? There's going to be other factors that cause almost a 3-4 times significant drop in birth rate. And so this is a factor, as well as if you look up Japan, it's got many other problems, like suicide rate is really bad. But I think that's more linked to lack of godliness and so on and so forth. So ethno-states, when have they been successful? There's no successful ethno-state. And so for that reason, and this is funny enough when I was speaking to Fuentes, because you mentioned him, because I always thought his position was an ethno-state, a white Christian ethno-state, but that's not his position. His position is very similar to our position, which is a majority white, but a multicultural state where he won't be deported just because you're basically a minority. So that's literally the most, I would say, balanced, maybe even more towards the left position you can even have. So that, from an immigration perspective, I think that's important.